Hello, I want to take a few minutes to share with you some changes that have occurred in the state of Iowa weighted matrix that is used for weighting of special education student IEPs. In August, the state procedures came out in a new release through the state of Iowa, and you may have noticed that the weighted enrollment factor matrices were not available. They were removed from the manual at that time. There is a reason that they were removed. There were some necessary changes that needed to occur. What you'll see on the screen right now is that the requirement is that the weight of a student, when it's assigned, it is supposed to be dependent on the required educational modifications that are needed to meet the special education needs of that child. On our existing versions of the weighted matrices for certain factors, for example, assistive technology, 4+ programs, etc., the matrices have taken into account the cost. So a breakdown of by dollar costs were indicated on the matrices. The Bureau of Finances, Facilities, Operations, and Transportation raised a question as to whether or not cost is an appropriate measure to determine weighting. And the implication was that cost matters are actually under the domain of the School Budget Review Committee. So in order for things to come into compliance, there were some necessary changes. Iowa had to make changes to the matrices to remove dollar amounts and instead had to use descriptive or time kinds of descriptions rather than monetary scales. I'd like to briefly walk through the changes that are impacted in this process. So the screen that you're seeing right now is a reminder that the section of each matrix, so we have our early childhood special education matrix and our K-12 special education matrix. It is the sections involving assistive technology, accessible educational materials, and equipment for safe transportation that is impacted. So if you reflect on previous versions, there were dollar figures associated with the division of points, and that has changed. So what you're seeing on the screen right now, when looking at matrix point assignments, 0 points would be awarded when the IEP shows that students just have needs of equipment that would be typical of all students, whereas 1 point would be added to the matrix considerations if minor equipment or software needs in excess of typical students is needed. And some examples are given there for clarity. That could be a tablet, a laptop, stroller, wagon, crutches, grab bars for toilets, those kinds of things, positioning equipment. So some examples are given there of minor equipment that would be awarded 1 point. That would also apply for maintenance of previously acquired equipment. It would also get 1 point as well. So for weighting purposes in the future, it's going to be very important for IEP teams to really clearly state these issues such as assistive technology and equipment on page F of the IEP. So it would be important to clearly state which items will be purchased while the IEP is being written and in effect. So we kind of think of in the count year what equipment would be acquired, or also maintenance efforts that might be happening. So a couple examples you're seeing on the screen there. Could be as clear as the district will purchase a classroom amplification system for Jenny's use and will provide for any needed maintenance. Examples could be batteries, service contract, those kinds of things. So that might be an example of maintenance of existing equipment. The second example there is the district will make classroom amplification system available for Jenny's use and will provide for needed maintenance. So notice the difference of those two bullets. One is describing an actual purchase, whereas the second is really implying maintenance of existing equipment. So thinking of those examples, if we move up to when 2 points would be assigned in this category, you can see the description there. Significant equipment needs in excess of that which would be typical of all students. So examples of quote significant equipment needs could be classroom amplification systems, dynamic display device, stander, gate trainer with accessories, possibly toileting systems. So you can see some examples there of what would be considered significant equipment needs. And then again, if we go back to our examples, here if we had on this last slide, purchase of an amplification system, if that were happening during the count year, you can see how that would make sense, that would be 2 points for a purchase of an amplification system. But on the other hand, the second one down here, when we look at maintaining an existing amplification system, which could include batteries or things like a service contract for a piece of equipment, when describing it that way, we can jump back here and you can see how that is more descriptive of 1 point, because that says maintenance of previously acquired equipment. So thinking about that, I've shifted back to the image of our early childhood special education weighted matrix, and you're looking at that document right here on screen. So pointing out that categories 1, 2, and 3 are unchanged. These are exactly the same categories that we saw on the previous early childhood matrix. It's this category 4 that has changed, and that 0, 1, or 2 point assignment that I just mentioned is reflected there. And notice here how it points out that the matrix is now using this language of year of purchase. Okay, so in awarding points, we think about the year of purchase for new equipment and assigning points accordingly, and the year of expenditure for maintenance kinds of issues. So it will be important for some of those things to be clarified in IEPs in order to assign weightings. And now I've shifted just to an image of the K-12 weighting matrix, and just again pointing out category 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. These have not changed. They're exactly as they had been, as well as 6, which is transportation. So those categories are unchanged. However, it's this last category you can see, which is descriptive in exactly the same way as early childhood. So in the K-12 matrix, the same change in this category, assistive tech and equipment. The change has been made for the 0, 1, 2 point descriptions here, that instead of using dollar figures, uses descriptive terms. I want to move on to some additional changes on the matrix. Now these that I'll be talking about now apply only to the K-12 matrix, and in the old matrix, the previous one, this would have been the second page that described how we would weight special circumstance kinds of things. That also previously had dollar figures associated with it. That has been changed to more descriptive language. So let's walk through some of those changes. So this category, you can see it's described there, IEP-driven, school-funded program provided by a community-based agency. So example of older high school age students and beyond that might go to a community college, a four-year college, a vocational skills agency. So for example, 4+ programs that we know some of our students do beyond traditional high school that are actually IEP-driven services that generate weighting. How would we look at level 1, 2, and 3 assignments? Let's walk through that. So you can see the new descriptive language of level 1, and that would be tuition fees, books and supplies, or job training or job coaching for less than 4 hours per day or less than 20 hours per week. So you can see that's being described as kind of a less than a full-time program. Let's move on here. And if we look at level 2 under this category of something like a 4+ program, level 2, you can see the description: tuition fees, book supplies, and transportation, or job training or job coaching for 4 or more hours, but less than 6 hours per day, or 20 or more, but less than 30 hours a week. So you can see it's kind of moving up in intensity, a little bit less than full-time, but more than half-time. And then level 3, you can see the description there. Tuition fees, book supplies, transportation, and housing. So for example, a student who would be participating in a college program that is IEP funded, a 4+ program as we know some of the programs that are living there, that would be a level 3 student. Or that could be job training, job coaching for 6 or more hours per day, or more than 30 hours per week. So again, this is the new way of thinking of weighting for these IEP-driven, school-funded kinds of programs that might be done by a college or a community-based agency for our kids that are beyond 18. The next special circumstance, and notice the header here, when an individually assigned sign language interpreter is the only LEA service. So we do have some students who don't require SDI by a special education teacher or other special education services, but they may require an individual sign language interpreter. So in those situations, you can see on screen here how level 1, 2, or 3 weighting would be determined, just simply looking at percentage of the day when an interpreter is needed. So level 1 would be 49% or less of the day, level 2, 50% to 74%, and level 3, 75 to 100% of the school day. Next special case would be if an individually assigned nurse that is district funded as part of an IEP services in addition to developing a health plan. If that individually assigned nurse is the only service of the IEP, you can see how level 1, 2, or 3 would be broken down. Again, 49% or less is level 1, 50 to 74% 2, and 75 to 100% would be a 3. So again, these exceptions are when these types of services are the only service. Typically, if there's other things going on, we would use the matrix system to look at weighting, but these are the special cases and the new language to describe how we would weight them. The next special case, if an individually assigned special education teacher is the only LEA service, this would be a fairly rare and unusual circumstance. But if an individualized teacher was the only LEA service, we would go off matrix and we would use, again, this similar format that you've seen, 49% or less of the school day, level 1, 50 to 74, level 2, 75 to 100%, level 3. But what if we have multiple LEA services that fall within the unique circumstances kind of situations? There is a process described in the new matrix for K-12 where levels can be added. So let's look at an example. What if an IEP called for a level 4 plus program, or would be a 4 plus program that would be level 1 in our previous dichotomy? So a 4 plus program for a portion of a day. So if we looked at that 4 plus program, we would have determined level 1 and an individually assigned sign language interpreter for 40% of the school day, which alone, that would also be level 1. And you can see on screen here, the idea is that we could add those. We could call that IEP level 2 because we had 2 unique circumstances, each of which resulted in level 1. So we would do 1 plus 1 equals level 2. So in these very unique circumstances, there will be times when we would look at more than one unique circumstance, do the addition to generate an appropriate weighting. So the same concept would apply for early childhood special education. For an IEP that specifies more than one of the unique circumstances, levels could be added. So we'll look at another example here. An IEP that calls for an individually assigned nurse for 50% of the school day. We would normally look at our previous breakdown and we would say level 2. But what if we also, the student's needs also called for an individually assigned sign language interpreter for 40% of the school day, which would also be viewed as level 2 in our new system, but that would turn into a level 3 IEP because we'd see level 2 plus level 2, but we know that the maximum that we can generate is level 3. So just an example showing that in really rare circumstances, we may have kids that would have a couple of the unique circumstances, and we can apply the criteria and add a level to generate an appropriate weighting for them. Now this next slide shows how we would look at things if we had perhaps a student where we would apply the matrix using points, using the regular matrix, but what if we also had some unique services in addition to that? So what if an individually assigned nurse or an individually assigned sign language interpreter are provided in addition to other district services, such as SDI? In these cases, 1 or 2 levels could be added to generate an appropriate weighting. So let's look at our example, the second bullet here. For example, if the matrix resulted in level 1 weighting, perhaps based on the SDI and other services in the regular matrix, and the child also requires a sign language interpreter for 60% of the day, the IEP would be level 3, and the reason being from the matrix we would generate 1, but we would add 2 from the unique circumstances table. And finally, let's look at an early childhood special education example where we might apply the matrix to district services and add unique services. So let's look at our example that we see here. For example, an IEP that calls for an individually assigned nurse for 50% of the school day, which would be level 2, and an individually assigned sign language interpreter for 40% of the school day, level 2. That would be level 2 IEP, the 2 plus 2 to the maximum of 3. So again, just another example showing that in some of these somewhat rare and unusual circumstances, we can apply this addition to generate an appropriate weighting for the student. So I'm going back to the view of the K-12 weighted matrix, and what you're seeing is the actual matrix itself, but I'm scrolling, noting that there is a second page to the matrix that gives guidance. And what I wanted to point out is some of the things that I just talked about, the unique circumstances, unusual circumstances, those are now presented as in kind of a table format. So you can see that right here. These things that I just kind of shared via the PowerPoint notes are showing these special circumstance categories, things like 4+ programs, sign language interpreters, individual nurses, individual special education teachers. And again, the descriptors are broken down by percentage of the day or by descriptive language rather than dollar amounts. And the last little section down here kind of gives you the guidance that describes that addition concept that I just talked about. So the ability to add more than one unique circumstance, add those together to generate an appropriate weighting, or even to have a student who would score in the matrix, but in addition would have one of these unique circumstances, and there's description here of that concept of adding those two together to generate a weighting. And then if I shift back to the early childhood matrix, the new one, again we have the matrix itself that we've talked about, and it also has a second page, and there's also the unique circumstances presented in a chart format. Remembering that all of our early childhood preschoolers, they always begin at level 2. They will be at least level 2, but this kind of breaks it down, showing what would change that to a level 3. The same descriptive language here of the possibility of adding unique circumstances or adding a matrix plus a circumstance. And you'll notice here the only reason the chart looks a little bit different is because 4+ programs are removed, since of course that wouldn't be applicable to preschoolers. So where are these matrices? I'm showing you the screen right now for www.iowaideainfo.org. They are living on the site right now. So if you recall here, if we go to www.iowaideainfo.org, we get our front page here. And if we click on State Special Education Procedures, we get to the place where the August release notes were posted and the most current statewide procedures. And you'll notice that the matrices are posted here as well. We have our early childhood matrix and we have our K-12 matrix, and those are there for you to access, because they were, just a reminder, they were not included in the statewide procedures, and they're being listed and made available here as new items. They are changed, they're applicable as we move forward. You can see the date here of September 29th, 2016. Iowa was asked, we were asked to move forward with these changes immediately. So these will be the matrices that we'll be applying in the future. Many of you that are watching the screencast would have gotten the link through an email, for those of you that got to it this way, I will also have attached PDF copies of the new matrices, but again, just I'm pointing out that they're living here on the Iowa IDA info site. So we will be moving forward and using these tools in the future with the special education coordinators in Green Hills AEA down the road at a future meeting. We will plan on having some follow-up discussion on this and talking more about it. But again, this will be used effective immediately per request at the state level for that to happen. General thoughts are that in applying the new matrix, we think that in most cases similar decisions are going to be made for assigning weighting. We just have a different way of looking at it versus as opposed to the dollar amounts. We have descriptive language, so we're not anticipating any major changes in decision making, but we wanted to pass on this new tool to all of those stakeholders out there that would need to know. Thank you for listening today, and again, we'll plan on doing a follow-up with our special education coordinators in the future.